really what some people need and maybe don't have before they start is really developing a conviction in the product or service that you're going to be selling. And I certainly had that with bone broth.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Shopify Masters, the weekly podcast powered by Shopify, your companion for starting and building a business. I'm your host, Felix Tia. The journey as an entrepreneur can really feel like a marathon, which is appropriate that my guest today is Connor Meakin, founder of Bluebird Provisions. He's also a marathon runner. In 2016, Connor had a devastating foot injury. His doctor said his foot may not fully heal and he might never be able to run long distance again. Taking his recovery into his own hands, Connor dove into the world of bone broth and was able to heal his foot and get back to ultra-marathon running and winning races. Soon after, Connor launched Bluebird Provisions and quit his job to share bone broth with the world. Welcome to the show, Connor.
Stoked to be here, Felix.
Yeah, so you got into bone broth for yourself to help with an injury. Tell us more about your background and how you arrived at using bone broth.
Sure. So I am a somewhat competitive ultra-marathon runner, if you can believe it. The tricky thing about ultra marathons is that you have to run a lot to be able to compete and excel at them. So the runners can probably see where this story's going. I had a lot of success, 2015, 2016, 2014, running and winning a lot of races, and had my goal race on the calendar summer of 2015, and just trained a little too hard, was training through some injuries, and ended up with a very strange injury to the bottom of my foot where I ruptured my plantar fascia, which there's not a lot of precedent for in the Western medical community. So it's kind of doing what everybody does, seeing doctors, specialists, physios, and no one really had an answer or a way to fix it. I even had some doctors telling me after looking at the imaging that, frankly, in their opinion, it would never heal. And I was told I'd never run again. And, running being my passion, it just hit me so hard. I was depressed. I was, physically and mentally just broken and defeated. Felt like Western medicine kind of let me down, and started looking at some more Eastern medicine approaches to healing the body. And, a lot of that has to do with kind of diet and certain things. So Googling stuff, eating all these, strange foods that supposedly had, healing properties for tendons and joints and that kind of thing. And one of the things I came across for healing tendon injuries like mine was collagen or gelatin, or in my case, bone broth, because bone broth has the same amino acid profile or, kind of protein structure as collagen. And there was a researcher doing some research using gelatin and collagen to heal tendon injuries. So I talked to this guy. He said, yeah, bone broth would be a good substitute. So I started researching and trying to make bone broth in my apartment. And much to the chagrin of my neighbors, I basically stunk up the whole apartment building for a few months there while I was, continuously making bone broth and drinking it and giving it to friends, and kind of just got so passionate about it because after a few months, I started to feel better. My injury started to heal. And, obviously that wasn't attributed only to bone broth. I was doing a lot of other things with bone broth, but just the timing of it made me so passionate about bone broth that I wanted to share it with anyone who would listen. So started doing a bit of research, Googling stuff, looking at some companies. Back in 2016, there were a few companies in the US that were kind of popping up and seemed to be doing okay. Not really any in Canada. So I said, hey, I could probably do better than what's out there, and decided to, kind of start the sort of craft local business here in Vancouver, Canada, where, I bought some equipment, rented a commercial kitchen, did it myself and hired people off Craigslist. And next thing you know, we're being sold in grocery stores and now kind of all over the place. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously there's more details in there. So I want to kind of dive into that. So when you were making the bone broth for your own purposes, you mentioned how much of a difference it made for you and for your own healing. What made you kind of take that leap, though, to say that I want to start a business behind this?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So before this, I worked for pretty early stage software company here in Vancouver called Hootsuite that, became a somewhat big tech company, kind of a decent Canadian success story for tech. And I was a pretty early employee there and got to kind of, learn from the CEO and some of the executives there. I was on the marketing team, so I got a pretty good glimpse at, marketing and brand and a lot of, copywriting and those types of things. And that really planted the bug that I wanted to start my own business. The food came in, somewhat around that time as well. I was always interested in cooking for myself and eating, and I was always that annoying person that was trying to find like healthy spins on different recipes, whether it's, baking, cooking, kind of anything. I try to healthify certain recipes. So before the bone broth, I actually took I almost started a sock company with a friend. That was difficult. I almost started a cricket farm, which, would have been a fully vertically integrated cricket protein product line. So I had a few little ideas cooking, and then the bone broth just seemed like that kind of perfect mix of opportunity and timing in the marketplace, and also kind of a deep, a developing passion, and really what some people, I would say, need and maybe don't have before they start is really developing a conviction in the product or service that you're going to be selling. And I certainly had that with bone broth. Yeah.
And do you have any ways that you strengthened it? Because it sounds like I'm wondering, like, what's your kind of beliefs about convictions? Is it something that you just kind of have for a given product or a given category or solution, or are there ways to build it up from scratch or to increase what you already have?
Yeah, that's a tricky one as well, because there's like that whole trope of follow your passion. People get in trouble because unfortunately some people aren't passionate about a lot of things or anything that maybe is worthy of a business. So I guess that's why I say conviction, and I think a lot of things are frankly interesting. So the more you get into certain things, I think you can really kind of nurture that belief and conviction and kind of develop it as you learn more. I would say in my case, I was somewhat lucky in that it came pretty naturally because I am interested in the niche, performance, nutrition, and health food. It personally helped me. So it was kind of like a nice combination, but I definitely realized for some people it is more difficult to kind of have that. I think my wife's a good example. She owns a hair salon, and she doesn't cut hair. She's the business side of it, and she has a certain passion and conviction for hair, but it doesn't light her up like bone broth does for me. So I realize that it's difficult for some people.
Do you find that these days, especially when you're making decisions about the direction to take your business next, whether you're making a decision because it's aligned with your passion or where a conviction has to be useful for a direction that you're taking your business, or if it's strictly an opportunity?
Yeah. So we're dealing with this right now. And I think it's a really good point, because our unique selling proposition is that we are the highest quality bone broth. So, in Canada, that's like certified organic with the best sourcing you can find. In the US, that is, non-GMO, all, pasture raised, basically the highest quality bone broth compared to the competition. Now, the reason I bring that up is because we are working on the development for a new product that we're launching into the US and the Canadian market. And it's incredibly difficult to develop this product. Now, I'm at a crossroads because my conviction and my passion brings certain values with it from a food system perspective and a sourcing perspective and a food quality perspective. If you compare that to the competition, I would say a lot of them are taking shortcuts in their sourcing and their manufacturing that has a product that is maybe more cost effective. But us being a more premium product, it limits the ingredients and the manufacturing practices we can use. So yeah, I'm struggling with that right now. It's like my passion is built on a certain ethical process for our products. And now that we have this new product that is going to be so good, but we can't quite do it the way that fits our brand ethos in terms of ethics and manufacturing and sourcing. So I'm trying to figure out if we can find a way to still do that, or do we go down this other road that doesn't really sacrifice our morals or ethics at all, but maybe it uses a certain process or ingredient that is certainly still better than the competition, but not the highest tier.
So I want to talk a bit about the observation that you made early on with the business, where you said that you looked around, you found some U.S. companies, none of them were in Canada. Does that mean that they weren't also selling in Canada? Like, what was the kind of niche or opening that you saw?
Yeah. So at the time, I was mostly looking at online at US companies, but in Canada, there was no one really selling online, and there was no one really in grocery stores, like the Whole Foods of the world. There was one kind of kicking around. It wasn't really a bone broth. They weren't doing a very good job. So specifically in Canada, I said, hey, there's really no one doing this. So it's a growing category. There's some data out there now. I'm gonna get this product to market, quickly, and hopefully get it on shelf at some of the good retailers and test things out for 6 months to a year and kind of see how things go.
Okay, so when you first started wanting to turn this thing into a product, what were the first steps? You mentioned you hired some people off of Craigslist. Like, what were you piecing together before you had that first version of the product that you were ready to sell?
The tricky thing about food products is there's not a whole lot of information online about, how to bring something to market. And, it varies state by state, country by country. For example, insurance, workers' comp, compliance issues, food safety certificates, those types of things. It's difficult to figure all that out, incorporation, all that. So, figuring all that out was a bit of a task, nothing some Googling can't figure out, and talking to some people. And then, once we figured that out, it was like, okay, shopping around, trying to find a commercial kitchen, looking at costs, trying to, figure out margins on what this product might cost, what we might be able to sell it at in a grocery store, figuring out, distributor margins if we were going to go that route. And luckily I had some kind of early mentors who, set me straight from a margin perspective, because when you're in grocery stores, the old trope is that like everyone along the way has kind of got their hand in your pocket making money, and the only one not making money is the brand on the shelf. So for us, once we kind of figured that out, it was a matter of, signing a lease at a kitchen, figuring out which equipment we used. It was pretty funny in the early days. I actually ended up using equipment that, home brewers used, like massive stainless steel, kettles and pots that like beer makers were using. I found those worked the best. So, buying equipment, and then it was, just kind of testing R&D, figuring out how we could do what I was doing in my kitchen at scale. And that took a little bit as well. It was hard work, frankly. It's a lot easier when you're not doing your own production, I would say, which is, where we're at now.
Yeah, so your kind of sales channels that you focused on or that were profitable for you kind of evolved over time. But when you first started out, were you selling to retailers, or who were your customers?
Yeah, when we started out, luckily I got a press hit locally here in Vancouver from, a friend that I had met from, working for this software company. He covered us, which was amazing. We got some decent online sales, and, they were only in Vancouver. So we were able to, deliver things without having to sort out the whole cold chain online situation, because at that point our products were only frozen, and as a result of them being frozen, that's when I kind of realized, hey, maybe it's cold chain online. It's not really ready for prime time yet. So that was the decision to go into retail. And yeah, in terms of getting those first retail accounts, we got lucky. I got some intros from, the relationships at the software company I was at before. Luckily, the CEO, Ryan, introduced me to the founder of, I would say, Western Canada's version of something like Thrive Market, called Spud. And they, brought me in and were able to, do quite well with them. And then, randomly, pretty early on, I got an email from the Whole Foods buyer for Pacific Northwest. And I actually thought it was a joke. I thought it was one of my friends messing with me. This guy emailed me, asking for samples, and said some people had been asking about it in the store. And I really couldn't believe it. Now, if I go back to kind of reverse engineering that, maybe here's a tip for the listeners. I don't know if it would still work now, but I actually sent in a lot of my friends and family members to Whole Foods, a couple of months before this email came in. And I just told them all, hey, can you do me a favor? Go talk to the manager and, tell them they need bone broth on the shelf and request this one specifically. So did that. I don't know. I can't remember how many actually did it, but they were saying, hey, there's this cool brand, Bluebird Provisions, making organic bone broth. You should bring it in. And it actually worked back in the day. I don't know if it would work now.
Wow. Surprised they weren't suspicious. Like, why are these people coming in and pitching a specific brand? But I guess that makes sense. That you could, I guess, do this organically too, where if you had like an online channel first, and then people were going to stores looking to buy and they can't, I can kind of kick things off that way too. So once you landed these retail accounts, did you ever change anything about the business? Because as you had mentioned at first, it was kind of, you're bringing via delivering locally at first. Now you're getting these retail accounts. Like it's a kind of a bigger stage now. Like what did you have to change about the business to support that sales channel?
I got one little kind of funny story. I remember before we got a delivery van, I drove a 2001 Toyota Corolla, and I'll never forget pulling into a Whole Foods loading bay with that Toyota Corolla. And I got so spooked. I was like, oh man, I can't show up at the loading bay with this Corolla. So I think I parked on the street. I had a big dolly, and I unloaded all these cases from I think it was coolers that I borrowed from my dad, and packed them all up on site, rocked up with my purchase order and a dolly full of products. And I'll never forget the buyer saying, hey, we got a loading bay right here. You could, bring the truck in. And I think I lied. I told him the truck, broke down or something, or, something happened and we couldn't reverse or something. So there's all these ridiculous stories like that along the way. But as we grew, we kind of had our own, delivery fulfillment van where I was, hired a driver and made that work. And then eventually as you grow, you have to use a distributor for retail sales where, you're going to sell into a distributor. They're going to mark the product up, 25 to 30%, depending what category you're in. And then they're going to service each individual grocery store. So, that gets tricky because, you all of a sudden have this margin that you think you have, and maybe you're profitable. And then once you hit a certain scale, you have to use distributors because the stores kind of mandate that you use distributors. And that gets tricky for your margin. And sometimes you have to raise your prices to be able to absorb that 28% margin. And then you got to bring in sales brokers who represent your product to get them into even bigger stores, because the grocery industry is quite antiquated and it's all about relationships and who you know. So, cold calling, cold emailing works sometimes if you have a really good viral unique product, but a lot of the times you need brokers and they take 5%. So yeah, you can kind of see where this is going, where everyone's kind of got their hand out and the profits start drying up pretty quick.
The first cup of coffee, it was awful.
Meet Rod Johnson, co-founder of Black & Bold, a premium specialty coffee and tea company powered by Shopify.
The journey of Black & Bold started with us opening our online Shopify store while we were burning beans in my business partner's garage. Shopify allows us to stay true to our mission by having an easily customizable and responsive site. They make it very easy for novices to try their hand in becoming entrepreneurs.
Get a free 14-day trial at shopify.com/podcast.
So once you made this transition into direct-to-consumer and online, what kind of new skill sets did you have to develop?
Yeah, first of all, it fit my personality a lot better, and it actually naturally fit my skill set a lot better as well. So yeah, the quick story is during COVID, our retail wholesale business just went flat. It went down a lot kind of that spring and summer of COVID, and didn't really recover until a year later. So had we not moved online, we certainly would have gone bankrupt. And I feel for a lot of these small food companies, and restaurants, and frankly, obviously a lot of businesses went bankrupt. The good thing about online is, I came from a marketing background, working 4 years for a software company. So I almost felt like I could kind of use that part of my brain creatively that previously had been, there was no time for, because I was stuck, getting up at 5 a.m, making bone broth. So that was great. And that's when I kind of was able to learn more about things like SEO and email marketing and, acquiring customers and all that kind of fun stuff. It was almost like it was certainly like a new chat. It was almost like a relaunch of our business in a lot of senses. And it just made my days, I would say, equally as stressful at times, but more enjoyable for sure.
Do you remember when things started kind of turning around where you're like, wow, this actually might work? Like we can actually keep this business going online? Yeah.
Throughout this time, I joined, a lot of these, Facebook groups for Shopify business owners. I'm probably in every single one of them out there. And a lot of these people were saying, it was just great to hear what was helping them get through COVID. A lot of people were saying, hey, in the March, April, hey, do a sale right now because it seems to be resonating with customers. Everyone's scared. They want to order things to their home. So things like that really helped us get through it, doing a sale then. And but as a result, the timing was difficult because bone broth is more of a winter thing and we were coming into the summer, but we were able to get through it with the limited kind of email list we had already been growing as a result of just our website being out there. And, a couple sales through the summer. I'll never forget. We had a Labor Day sale that just did really well, frankly. And I wasn't expecting it to do so well. So things like that to bring in some cash through the summer. And then all through the while, I knew that, shipping frozen bone broth wasn't going to work or scale long-term. So while we were doing that, I was really hard at work developing a shelf-stable version of our product. And what that looked like was kind of me reverse engineering all of the, I would say like the checklist of a D2C, shipping friendly product. So for me, it was like, okay, it has to be less than a pound when we ship one unit. It has to fit these certain dimensions. So for me, that ended up being a dehydrated product where we worked on dehydrating our existing liquid bone broth into a powder. So I was kind of hard at work at that and, selling online with the frozen bone broth to get through it. And, all the while it was like, okay, let's just get this new product launched because that's going to allow us to launch in the US as well, which is a large market. So it was kind of just like keeping things going until we could get this new product launched.
You pivoted the product and you said during this time you were figuring out, okay, I have the store now. How do I actually get customers to the store? Because at this point you have zero customers, right? Meaning that everyone that was buying from you went to the store. You had no email list or anything. What was the starting point for you online?
Luckily, we had kind of stumbled into a few articles that I had written on our, Shopify blog that, when I looked at the I'd written these kind of early on in our days and looking at the traffic, a year later, they had some pretty decent traffic. So I started, learning about SEO and reading about kind of some of these people back in the day, like Neil Patel, who were talking about SEO and niche websites and those types of things. So I started figuring out that, hey, you got to write these long articles. They call them like skyscraper pieces of content that are just better than whatever's out there right now on the first page of Google. So started writing articles about bone broth benefits, stuff about collagen as well. And I figured out a process that was able to get articles to rank on the first page. And, some of them were in the first 3. So, but before I knew it, we were acquiring customers, a couple months after this, for free. So it was unbelievable. The scale wasn't massive at this time, but because of the traffic, we were getting email addresses as well. So we were converting somewhere between, 2 to 4% of visitors were giving us their email. At the same time, I was learning about, email marketing and Klaviyo and kind of what's going on there. So figured that out. I said, okay, SEO and email, let's figure that out for late 2020, 2020, early 2021. And doubling down on those two really helped us establish a nice foundation for our e-commerce sales and revenue and that kind of thing. And looking back, we were able to generate, I think around our average was around 40% of our revenue was attributed to email. So we're just kind of like making the most of what we had and really kind of just like still scraping by. But I thought there were some leading indicators that would tell me that, things were moving in the right direction.
So let's talk about those. I think these are certainly areas that are going to be super useful for a lot of listeners out there that do have limited budgets or that want to build a kind of a foundation of organic traffic. So let's start with the SEO one. What did you learn about writing articles, or you mentioned these skyscraper articles? Tell us more about what that means tactically when you're sitting down to create content that will drive organic traffic to your site.
The first thing I would say to store owners is to make sure you kind of have I call it like the fundamentals, make sure you got your website kind of in check. So make sure it loads somewhat fast. And then I would say you can invest in a third-party app to kind of make sure that your title tags and everything is optimized for your search terms. We use one called SEO Manager that kind of just makes it incredibly easy to make sure you're getting that kind of low-hanging fruit for ranking your homepage, product pages, collection pages, all that kind of fun stuff. Once you've got that out of the way, what I do is really kind of like the long form content and what a lot of these SEO people call the content cluster. So the content cluster is essentially building a cluster of articles around one key piece of content or article. So you have your skyscraper article, which for anyone who hasn't heard this, like you basically want to have the highest skyscraper, for your keywords. So you find the best article or the best few articles on the keywords. So in our case, it was, hey, bone broth or bone broth powder. I'd look at what's out there. I would find the headings and the subheadings. And then from there, you're basically just answering questions that you are receiving or that someone would want to learn about when reading an article about the benefits of bone broth. So once you fill that out, I would usually get to, it doesn't have to be around 2,000 words, but plus or minus. I would include some sort of infographic that I would make in Canva. I mean, these are not professionally designed, but it kind of goes with my do more with less philosophy. Would get a few more kind of images and graphs ideally. And then you have this one piece of content, and then you want to write 5 to 10 shorter articles that are almost like supporting this one large piece of content. And that's important because in these short articles, they are maybe peripherally related to your main keyword in the one piece of content, but maybe they're answering slightly different questions or worded in a slightly different way. And these, in my experience, these are shorter, 500 to 800 words. But the key here is you are linking only in one direction. So you're linking from these shorter clustered articles to the long, 2,000 word skyscraper article. And, from what I know, these links from one, these cluster of articles all to this one article sends the signal to Google that, hey, this, piece of content is prioritized in the website, and that is going to hopefully favorably rank that article.
This is all on site, all this content you're talking about is all on your blog.
Yeah, this is all just on the blog or dedicated pages on your website. And yeah, this is without any kind of backlink outreach or anything.
So once you can optimize this for SEO, what's the kind of call to action? How do you get them, or do you even have to think about how to get them to click over to see the products?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've tried just about everything for this. Originally, I would paste in the buy button that you can use, the Shopify buy button. I found that actually didn't convert as well. And now what we ended up doing, so you kind of you want an organic call to action, hopefully in, the first couple of paragraphs of the article, because, everyone's scrollers. And then what we do is we also have probably two different calls to action that are images. So I would make an image in Canva that looks like a little advertisement, and it even has a little fake button all within the image that I made on Canva. And that'll be like, hey, try this delicious collagen-rich bone broth, and then it'll say buy now or learn more with a button. But in reality, the whole image is just clickable. So I found those actually converted better than anything else. And then all the while, you're also embedding hopefully some email forms, maybe some email pop-ups to get the email list, because a lot of the traffic you're going to get from SEO is, pretty top of the funnel. They're not necessarily ready to buy. So hopefully you can convert a certain percentage to your email list, nurture them with a good, welcome campaign or offer, and hopefully a certain percentage of those will eventually convert.
Were there pieces of content that surprised you one way or the other, where you were not thinking that it would do much, but then it for some reason gets a lot of traffic, or the other way around, where you thought that this one would do really well, but just kind of petered out?
Yeah, it's so hit and miss. I wrote an article early on that was just a difference between bone broth, stock, and broth. And that was the one that gave me the signal that, hey, wow, we're getting a lot of traffic and some sales from this article. Now, I was able to repeat that a lot. I started writing about collagen, was able to get on the first page with a article about collagen that brought in most of our traffic for a year. But then I started writing about a lot of kind of different stuff. I would say, writing about general health food things, writing about apple cider vinegar, writing about what else? Writing about Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat. I found those didn't bring in as much traffic, and they certainly didn't convert, because it kind of goes back to the idea of domain authority, where, Google or search engines probably saw us as an authority for bone broth and collagen, but since we hadn't been publishing a lot of articles about other topics around food and nutrition, like, Impossible Foods or Beyond Meat, we were certainly not an authority in their eyes. So those articles, despite, in my opinion, I'm obviously biased, being good in-depth articles, they really just kind of sat there and didn't bring in much traffic.
So when you know the kind of content or the domain authority, the kind of area that works the best for driving traffic, how much content can you really create here? Like, do you find that it's like you have a limitless or a always growing list of ideas that content ideas, or like is there a certain point where like, okay, I'm not sure how much more we can write about bone broth?
Yeah, that's the thing. We're kind of coming up to that right now. I feel like I've covered just about everything to do with bone broth because it's a relatively small niche. I would say a strategy for listeners that maybe is not talked about very often and what we're kind of getting into is writing buyer's guides for your keywords or your niche. And we're finding that these, they don't bring in a ton of traffic, but they're so targeted that they convert quite well. So for example, I'm writing buyer's guides for the bone broth industry. And it's interesting because this will be like a list, hey, here's the best bone broths in the USA. And you're going to list, you're ideally going to list your product first, but you're going to have your competitors or, peripheral competitors below you on like a list of 5 or 10, and, some people might think it's risky, but, you're only going to link to your product. You're going to write a little bit about your competitors, and you find that these convert incredibly well and they seem to rank quite well too. So I would say that's like kind of some low hanging fruit for listeners. The other interesting one, if you're a small brand getting started, is writing like comparison articles. This is a lot of what, software companies do. You're writing comparison articles between you and your competitors. And you might think this is another kind of weird tactic, but particularly if you're the smaller brand and your competitors are larger, if you use your competitors' keywords in the title and in the article, you can actually rank for their keywords and like quote unquote steal some of their traffic for people that are searching for their items. Because a lot of people, when they're searching for something, if you think about it from like an intent perspective, they're looking for feedback about this product or reviews on this product. So if you write, X product review, that's going to entice readers to click through and read that. And we're finding that works quite well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when I guess thinking about it, where the buyer's guides and the competitor kind of articles are high purchase intent. People are coming in looking to buy something, not just like learning about bone broth. Like they're ready to make a purchase and they kind of want to kind of get some pieces of information squared away before they make a decision to buy. Now, I want to talk about the other kind of source of, free traffic, which is with email. So tell us more about, how were you able to collect the emails, and then what are you sending them?
Yeah, so we are, again, quite aggressive with email capture. Everyone hates the pop-ups, but there's a reason why all the marketers use them because they work. So if you come to our website, we're going to hit you with a pop-up with an offer. I've tested just about every offer out there. There's like the typical 10% off discount code that most brands use. We found what converts better is we're going to enter you into a contest to win a 1-month supply of bone broth for free. So that is what converts best for us. And that's going to be a pop-up. When you land on the page, there's going to be a similar pop-up when you go to exit the page. If you land on a blog article, you're going to get another pop-up that is similar once you're scrolling to a certain percentage. I think we do 60%. And we also have, email forms embedded throughout all the blog posts as well. And with this, we are able to get, I think it's between 2.5% to 5% of all traffic. We're able to get their email address. I think I've heard of some companies doing a lot better, up to 10%, but my hunch is that they are not getting mostly organic traffic because I think organic traffic tends to not convert as well for email or for sales because it's just a lot of people under the sun searching for certain things. Now, the other quick interesting thing I'd say that you're seeing some brands do and that we're doing as well, we do have a bone broth quiz. The quiz, it's pretty simple. We use Typeform for it. It's going to ask you to answer 2 questions about your background and your kind of goals with bone broth and your experience level with bone broth. And that's going to use some conditional logic to spit out a personalized product recommendation. And yeah, people seem to love the quiz. They seem to love having a personalized recommendation. And then from there, they're going to get a custom welcome series based on their quiz results. So yeah, it's pretty cool what you can do in the back end with Klaviyo, and really just custom tailoring your welcome flow based on whether they came from a pop-up or a quiz result. From there, yeah, we're obviously trying to get the initial purchase. So, we're going to share a little bit about the brand, a little bit about, my background, because I would say our story, resonates quite well with consumers who are looking for bone broth. So we put our story out there first, and then we're going to hit you with probably, I got to look, it's like around 15 to 20 emails with a cadence of, every 2 to 5 days between emails. And hopefully we get a purchase. Obviously, you're not going to get everyone to purchase. So we're really hoping for a purchase or an unsubscribe, because I don't want people sitting on the list that are never going to buy.
So that's bluebirdprovisions.co is a website. And I'll leave you this last question. What do you think is the most important thing for you to personally focus on to get the company to that next level?
Yeah, I think in the short term, it is product development, getting some new products out there, because our existing dehydrated bone broth is doing amazingly well with consumers. So we just want to continue serving our community with the absolute best products out there. So product development and customer acquisition are, the two best things we can do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your advice, Connor.
Thanks so much, Felix. I had a blast.
And that's all the time we have this week. Come hang out with us next time on Shopify Masters. Again, I'm Felix Tia. Thank you and take care.